Good morning and welcome to this RM2 webinar on the results of the EOT survey, the latest results, because this is an exercise that we do roughly annually. My name is Nigel Mason and I'm a senior associate of RM2, and we are a leading advisor on EOTs and employee share schemes. We are ourselves EOT-owned as of about a year ago, something which makes a lot of sense for a professional services firm. So our own data is included in the results that you are about to see. So I could just move on to the next slide. I'm going to whisk through the data. I think we've all become amateur statisticians in the last few weeks, and I think we're familiar with looking at charts of different kinds. I think we can only take in so much data in one session, so I'm going to keep this pretty short. Please do ask questions as we go through, and then I will answer as many as I can at the end. We will be posting a recording of the webinar both on the RM2 website and on our YouTube channel. Before we get started, I just want to try a little poll. I want to get a sense of who is in the audience. So hopefully on your screen, you should have a question asking you to identify yourself in one of those categories. I'll just give that a few seconds to work its way through. So that's very helpful, thank you. The results should be on your screen. Just go back to that. There we are. We have the biggest group are advisors who support EOT companies. Next biggest group, companies who are exploring EOTs, a small number of existing EOT companies, and then I'm glad I put the category other, allowing you to hide under anonymity. Let's go back to the presentation. So the subject in question, an employee ownership trust, has been around since the Finance Act of 2014, and it was introduced to encourage transitions to majority or complete employee ownership through the mechanism of a trust. It does that by providing quite attractive capital gains tax relief for business owners who sell a majority stake to an EOT. And it also offers the means to pay income tax-free bonuses to employees. At all times, the trust must operate for the benefit of all employees on similar terms. So it's a egalitarian structure. And I have to say, one of the biggest benefits of the EOT structure is that it's allowed the whole industry to move on from a period when employee benefit trusts, of which EOTs are a particular kind, were tarnished with a poor reputation of tax avoidance and especially avoiding tax on remuneration. So the EOT has helped to rehabilitate the EBT structure, which has always been extremely useful for establishing stable, long-term employee ownership, but which had, until the EOT, become a little bit discredited. So we're much more at the John Lewis end of the spectrum than the Glasgow Rangers end of the spectrum. But of course, John Lewis isn't the only well-known company to have this structure, and over the last few years, a number of well-known names have adopted EOTs. Aardman Animations, Richer Sounds, Riverford Organics, and a significant number of large architect practices. The one here is Alford Hall, Monaghan Morris, AHMM. So it's the gradual involvement of these very well-known names that has encouraged lots of other businesses to look at this route. And as a result, we've seen very significant growth in this sector, as you will see. So we started this survey back in 2015 with EOA as the effectively the kind of sponsor for it, because it's EOA who represents this sector most kind of strongly to government and other stakeholders. The problem being there is no central register of EOTs, and therefore we have to identify EOT companies from a variety of different sources: Companies House, membership of EOA, internet searches, and the dedicated EOT survey website. But we are not claiming that we have the complete list. In fact, I would be estimating that we are failing to identify further sort of 10 or 20% of EOTs who are out there but have chosen not to declare their ownership structure, and where the ownership structure is not obviously identifiable from public records. So what you see here is the best guess, rather the best estimate. We closed the list for analysis at the middle of March, and therefore everything you see here predates the coronavirus lockdown. That's obviously going to have a significant effect on numbers, and maybe we can talk a bit about that towards the end. We use Companies House records a lot for data, and we also use a service called FAME, which is a very comprehensive database of company information. We've collaborated with Professor Andrew Robinson from the University of Leeds, who is a member of the White Rose Employee Ownership Centre. The White Rose Centre do their own survey, and Andrew and I will be collaborating on that survey, and hopefully we'll be able to combine results. Ours is a much more quantitative survey, I think, than Andrew's, who will be able to look more into some of the kind of qualitative aspects of EOTs. And we hope to be presenting more results with hopefully more EOTs by the time of the EOA conference in November. That happens, and if it doesn't happen physically, I'm sure there'll be some form of virtual gathering. So onto the numbers. So 2019 was a record year for EOTs. Nearly 100 new EOTs established. On top of the blue bars, which are the live EOTs and their year of establishment, I've also put the EOTs which have since been discontinued for various reasons. That would either be insolvency or voluntary winding up, or an onward sale to a third party. And including those 11 discontinued EOTs, there have been a total of 325 new EOTs since the legislation in 2014. You'll see the number in 2020 is relatively low at 11. There is always a bit of a time lag between the establishment of an EOT and it being reported at Companies House. As I say, this data was, a line was drawn at the middle of March, and I expect we will see a much lower number of EOTs being established in this calendar year. I think many businesses have got urgent things to think about at the moment. Ownership succession might not always be the top of the list, but it is one of those things which all businesses have to tackle, and possibly in the second half of the year we should see a revival. If you look at the cumulative picture, there are now 314 live EOTs, and if the growth rate up to the end of 2019 were to continue, and that's a compound annual growth rate of over 30%, then on those trends, you would expect to see 2,000 EOT companies by the year 2030. It remains to be seen whether that growth rate does continue. I do think, though, there are reasons to be optimistic. I think the change to the entrepreneurs relief in the March budget, which capped the lifetime limit at £1 million, will have the effect of encouraging more business owners to look at the tax-free EOT route. Although, of course, there are many reasons why companies choose this route, and tax is rarely actually the main one. So adding together the new EOTs to a group that I've called deemed EOTs, we've got a total of 350 companies with this ownership structure. Now, the deemed EOTs are old employee benefit trusts which predate the EOT legislation, but which behaved like EOTs and were allowed to effectively be treated as EOTs for the purposes of paying bonuses to employees. The largest one being John Lewis Partnership. There are another 35 companies in that sort of category. John Lewis does account for the lion's share of the 87,000 employees in that cohort, and that's now a closed group. It won't expand in number because these EBTs had to exist in December 2013 to qualify. So it's the new EOTs that will now be driving the growth. If we look at distribution by size, and size here means number of employees, you'll see that EOTs are most common in the 10 to 49 employee bracket, 164 in that group. But there is a significant number of very large EOTs with more than 250 employees. The red numbers at the top of each bar denote the sort of penetration of EOTs in that size group of private companies nationally. So, for example, 2.7 out of every 1,000 private companies in the size range 50 to 249 are now EOTs. So that's the size range seeing the highest sort of penetration, but it also illustrates just how much further potential growth exists. This shows the top 10 EOTs by employee numbers. Some of those well-known names, and all of these companies will also qualify for inclusion on the top 50 list of employee-owned companies, which RM2 analyzes and publishes normally in the middle of the year in time for Employee Ownership Day. And we hope to be doing the same this year, but that gives you a little sneak preview of 10 of the 50 names that will be coming out later. As EOTs have grown in popularity and as time has passed since the legislation, you can see from this chart that they've become more popular in smaller companies. So this shows the average employees per EOT by year of establishment. The average is now around about 70 employees. Overall, the mean number of employees per EOT is 90, and the median number is 29. So that shows the effect of the kind of small number of very large EOTs that skews the average to a bigger number. This next chart shows the percentage of a company's share capital owned by the EOT. And in 57% of cases, the EOT owns the entire share capital. In a further 36% of cases, the EOT owns more than 50%, but less than 100%. So the minority shareholders may well be original owners who chose not to sell their entire stake. They may be management and employees who have subscribed for shares alongside an EOT so as to dilute its stake down from an original 100% level. And a small number may have external investors. And then 7% of EOTs own a minority stake. So they don't enjoy any particular tax advantage because the capital gains tax treatment and the income tax benefit of bonuses only applies to majority EOTs. Nevertheless, a number of companies have thought it good structure to establish, and possibly some of those will be en route to a majority EOT stake in time, we shall see. This next slide looks at the type of trustee arrangements. And you will see the red are trustees incorporated as companies limited by guarantee, which is common form of incorporation for not-for-profit companies and social enterprises of various kinds. The blue are companies limited by shares. The green are EOTs which have no corporate trustee, but instead have individuals as trustees, sort of embedded in the trustee document. The purple shows the number with offshore trustees. And there are 4 for which we couldn't identify the trustee structure, and 1, which isn't quite shown on the pie chart, is set up as an LLP. So you'll see that it is overwhelmingly common for trustees to be incorporated. There are good administration reasons for that. It makes it a lot easier to appoint and remove trustees. It also provides individuals with a degree of protection because they are directors of a limited company, whereas as individuals, they're a little bit more exposed to risk. Just a sort of slightly technical point that only if the trustee has been set up as a company limited by shares is it possible for the company to operate an EMI share option scheme, and that's to do with the qualifying conditions for EMI schemes and the fact that a company establishing an EMI has to have a greater than 50% shareholding of all its group companies. We also looked at how many trustee directors were on the boards of those trustees that were incorporated, and you'll see the most common number is 3. The next most common number is 5 by a narrow margin, and then 4. The largest number of trustee directors we found was 9. We also tried to at least estimate the proportion of trustee boards where it looked like there were employee trustee directors, and a proxy for that, admittedly a rather crude one, was cases where a trustee director only had that one directorship to their name, and we found in 69% of cases a trustee board had at least one director with no other directorships. Now, that's not a particularly accurate way of judging employee directorships, but it's the best available in the absence of any kind of more confidential information. We also found that in 29% of cases, trustee boards had a majority of directors where this was their sole directorship. And we also had a stab at estimating the proportion of trustee boards that appear to have independent professionals, and they could be identified by having a significant number of other directorships with a wide variety of different companies. And about 1 in 5 appear to have independent professionals. That's most likely to be an underestimate. If we look at the geographical distribution, the blue charts show the proportion of EOTs in each region of the country, and the red show the proportion of all businesses in each region of the country. And these have been ranked from left to right in order of overrepresentation by EOTs. So at the left-hand side, Scotland has significantly more EOTs than you would expect given the distribution of businesses nationally. Next is London, and then right at the other end, for reasons I don't think anyone can obviously explain, East Midlands and East Anglia has the fewest EOTs as a percentage of businesses in that region. I think the reasons for Scotland having such strong representation are a lot to do with the prominent role that the Scottish Government has played in promoting employee ownership through Scottish Enterprise and CDS Scotland, which has made very tangible steps to encourage this form of ownership, including subsidising feasibility analyses. And then London, I think, has a disproportionate number of professional services businesses that are headquartered there, and a lot of media, a lot of architecture, a lot of consultancy services, and that may well explain the overrepresentation in London. And if we look at the distribution by trade sector, I apologise that the axis labels are quite small there. It's a similar layout, so we have ranked the percentage, we've ranked the distribution of EOTs in order of overrepresentation. So at the top, EOTs are most overrepresented in the professional, scientific and technical services sector, followed by, I think, a bit surprising, the manufacturing sector, which you know, some would regard as the one of the most capital-intensive sectors of the economy, and one in which you know, external ownership by investors is much more likely to be the norm. And right at the bottom, we've got agriculture, forestry, and fishing, where there are very few EOTs. So this pattern is repeated each time we analyse the results. So no particular surprises there. This is the last slide, I think. Yep. So we looked at how EOTs were financed, and the best measure of an EOT being externally financed by a bank or another non-bank lender is the existence of a registered charge at Companies House. In almost all cases, an external lender is going to take security in the form of a charge over a company's assets, a debenture, a mortgage, and that will be registered at Companies House. So if you look at the blue slice, 5.4%, and the green slice, 13.7%, then that is the proportion of EOTs, 19.1% in total, which have external finance. And then the red slice are instances where a charge has been registered, but by selling shareholders only, implying entirely vendor financed EOTs. And what surprised me was just how many EOTs have no charge registered with anyone, and including the selling shareholders. So if you add up the purple slice and the green slice, which is charges registered only to external lenders, it would imply that as many as 72% of EOTs have no security protection offered to selling shareholders, and that must mean that some of those involved no deferred consideration at all. Vendors therefore sold on pretty generous terms. It's possible that some charges have been registered at the subsidiary level, not at the top company level. But I think the most likely conclusion is that most vendors have proved willing to accept deferred consideration without security, which is very generous. That's all I've got to say on the data. If you are an EOT company, or if you are advising EOT companies, do please complete the short questionnaire at the EOT Survey website. It only takes 10 minutes, but it does provide a lot of the data for this survey. And I am very happy to take any questions. Let me just see if any have come in. There seem to be slightly shorter questions. Give you a couple of minutes to bring one up if you'd like to. If you want to find out more about EOTs, then my colleague Richard Cowley is presenting on Wednesday the 13th of May, an introductory webinar on EOTs at 4 o'clock. You just need to register on the RM2 website. Well, either my command of this control panel is incomplete, or I have no questions. So I am going to finish just before the 30-minute deadline, and thank you all very much for your participation. These slides will be available for downloading from the EOT Survey website, and also a recording of this webinar will be available by the end of the week. So thank you all very much for attending, and stay safe and well. Goodbye.